The movement of substances across the cell membrane is a fundamental process for all cells. It allows them to acquire the nutrients they need, eliminate waste products, and communicate with their environment. In this video, I'll discuss various mechanisms for the transport of substances and fluid across cell membranes. The cell membrane acts as a gatekeeper, regulating the passage of materials into and out of the cell. It allows only certain substances to pass through freely, while others require specific mechanisms or transporters. There are two main categories of transport across the membrane: passive transport and active transport. Passive transport requires no energy from the cell. Substances move naturally across the membrane due to a concentration gradient or pressure difference. Examples of passive transport include diffusion, facilitated diffusion, osmosis, and filtration. On the other hand, active transport is like pumping against the current. It requires energy from the cell, typically in the form of ATP. This allows substances to move across the membrane even against a concentration gradient, from an area of lower concentration to an area of higher concentration. Examples of active transportation are movement by a pump such as sodium-potassium pump, and movement by vesicles such as endocytosis and exocytosis. Diffusion. Diffusion is a natural movement of particles from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. Diffusion is a form of passive transport. That is, it does not require energy to occur. Diffusion occurs in air or water. It can perhaps be best illustrated by placing a dye tablet in water. As the dye tablet dissolves, the particles move away from the tablet where concentration is high to the edges of the container, where the concentration of particles is low. Diffusion continues until the particles are evenly distributed. The point at which no further diffusion occurs is called equilibrium. Even when a membrane stands in the way, the particles will still diffuse through it as long as the membrane is permeable to those particles. A difference in the concentration of a substance from one point to another is called a concentration gradient. When the particles move from an area of greater to lesser concentration, as occurs in diffusion, the particles are said to move down the concentration gradient. Facilitated diffusion. Some molecules need other molecules to help or facilitate their movement across a membrane. This is called facilitated diffusion. As with regular diffusion, molecules move down the concentration gradient from an area of greater to lesser concentration. In facilitated diffusion, a solute that cannot pass through the membrane, such as glucose, enters a channel in a protein molecule that is part of the membrane. The solute binds to a receptor site on the protein. The binding process causes the protein to change shape. This alteration in the shape of the carrier protein ejects the solute into the cell's interior. Osmosis. Osmosis is a type of diffusion that happens when a particular substance cannot cross a membrane. The membrane in the container shown is separating a 5% albumin solution from a 10% albumin solution. The membrane is permeable to water, but not to albumin. Hence, this membrane is called a semi-permeable membrane. In this situation, the water moves in an effort to equalize the concentration. The water will move toward the side with a higher concentration. The concentration of the two solutions eventually equalizes, but in the process, one side ends up with a greater volume of water. Tonicity. Tonicity refers to the relative concentration of impermeable solutes between a cell and its surrounding environment. It essentially describes the solution's strength in terms of its ability to draw or repel water. Solutions with a higher concentration of impermeable solutes have a higher osmotic pressure. This pressure represents the force that tends to draw water into the solution to dilute the solutes and reach equilibrium. Tonicity plays a crucial role in maintaining a cell's size and shape. Depending on the solute concentration compared to the cell's interior, solutions can be classified as isotonic, hypertonic, or hypotonic. Filtration. In filtration, water and dissolved particles are forced across microscopic spaces between cells from an area of higher to lower pressure. One of the most obvious examples of filtration in the body occurs in capillaries. The pressure of blood inside the capillaries forces water and dissolved materials, such as nutrients, into the surrounding tissue fluid. It is through filtration that the body's cells receive the nutrients they need to survive. Filtration is also the method the kidneys use to remove waste products from the blood. Active transport. Active transport is the process of moving substances through cell membranes using energy. Active transport defies the natural flow of molecules by moving substances against their concentration gradient, requiring energy input from the cell in the form of ATP. The key players in active transport are carrier proteins. These carrier proteins can also be called pumps because they actively transport substances against the concentration gradient. One of the most important active transport systems in the body is the sodium-potassium pump. This pump actively pumps sodium ions out of the cell and potassium ions into the cell, maintaining a specific concentration gradient across the membrane. This helps the cells to maintain a proper balance of fluids within cells, provide the electrical potential necessary for nervous system activity, and even helps in heat production. Transport by vesicles. Transport by vesicles is a unique form of active transport that utilizes vesicles for the movement of large molecules or particles across the cell membrane. There are two ways to transport by vesicles: exocytosis and endocytosis. Exocytosis refers to the process where materials are transported out of the cell. Vesicles formed within the cell fuse with the cell membrane, releasing their contents to the extracellular space. This process is vital for various cellular functions, such as secretion and communication. Endocytosis refers to the process of engulfing large molecules or particles from the external environment and bringing them into the cell.